So it's looking pretty good right now. Um, I definitely want to add a shadow here. So I'll use a solid, so just Control Y to create a solid. I want it to be a black solid because shadows are black. Hit OK, and it's just put a black image over everything, so I don't want that. I want to mask out this solid. So if I click and hold on the rectangle tool, I can find the ellipse tool, and I'll drag an ellipse to create that mask. And if I hit V, I can go to my selection tool. I can double click on my mask to move it where I want it. And this is around where I want my shadow. And I can enter to exit that transformation tool. I want to move this shadow layer, which I should name shadow. I want to move it underneath my CG. So now the shadow is appearing underneath. And I also want to feather this mask. So if I open up my mask settings and drag up on the feather, now it's really soft, and so it's looking a little better integrated on the ground here. We should also have a little bit of shadow on top of the CG here. So I'm actually going to duplicate this shadow layer. So I'll have a second shadow on top of my CG, and this will not be as strong. So I'm going to bring down the transparency. So I'll hit T on the keyboard to get to my opacity, and I'll drag down the opacity until I get something that I like. I think I'll also bring down the feather, so I can hit M twice, or 3 times to pull up mask feather. I'll bring down my feathering. I can also bring down my mask expansion. You just kind of play with this until you get something you like. And at some point you might want to switch to full resolution view so you can see how this is actually going to look, because at this point it's too low detail to discern. If you hit Shift T, you can add opacity to your drop down here. So I'll bring the opacity up just a bit. And this will take a while longer to render since we're in full resolution mode. So I kind of liking the 100%. So that's feeling a little better integrated, just kind of adding a contact shadow right there on the ground. Actually, now that I'm looking at this in a wider view, I want to make this mask a little elongated, especially off this way. But now I'm getting this shadow overlapping the backpack, so that's something I need to cut out. So I'll duplicate my footage here with Control D. I'll move the footage to the very top, but still underneath the LUT, so now we're not seeing our CG anymore. And I just want to cut out this backpack, so I'll use my pen tool, which is G. I can click and drag to create curves, or I can just click once to create a harsh point. And I'll just quickly trace around this backpack. I probably don't need to focus on this area down here too much because the shadow's not really overlapping it. So I can do a rougher job here, but we do want to pay attention. We do want to be detailed in this section of the backpack, because this is where the shadow is overlapping it, and we want this edge to be clean, and we want this edge to be nice. And just select your first point again to close your selection. And once that loads again, your mask should automatically apply, and we'll just have this cut out of the backpack now in front of our shadow layer. And actually, that line's a little harsh, so I'm going to open up my mask settings and just give it a little bit of a feather, maybe 3 pixels. That's feeling a little softer, a little more realistic. Nice. And that's generally something that helps, is adding, actually let's do 2 pixels, that 3 is just a little too soft. Something with these CG renders is they're so perfectly sharp, it feels unrealistic, even compared to the background here. So I'm actually going to add a little bit of a blur to give it some realism. So I'll find my CG layer, and I'll also add a blur. Just a Gaussian blur is fine. I'll make it 2 pixels. And the other thing that really helps is adding some noise. So I'll also add noise. And I'll just do about 5%. And these are going to be really subtle changes, except for that. 5% is way too much. Let's do 1%. And you can see these differences by toggling on and off this effects button. So I'll see the slight difference there, and it actually does make a pretty big difference in the realism. I'm going to bring this Gaussian blur up to 2.5. Just make it a little softer. So that feels a little better integrated. I'm actually going to blur it just a little bit more. Yeah, I feel like that's pretty nice. You know, I'm also noticing, I'm also noticing it's a little too green. I think I should tint this a little bit purple. And that's what the LUT is really helpful for, because I don't think I'd be able to see that difference without the LUT applied if we were looking at this raw. So I think I'll do half that, probably 7. I just want to render one frame, so I'm going to hit B to set my first frame, and then I'm going to hit N to set my last frame. And since that was on the same frame, my composition is only 1 frame long. You can see that my work area is shortened here. So I'll hit Control M to send this to the render queue. Let's save it as a TIFF, because that's a good high quality file type. And we'll set the location, put our name on it, and version 3.